The Overwatch League East region is ready to commence Phase 2 of the spring stage. After 3 hard-fought weeks, it's time for the knockouts. The winners of this tournament punch their tickets to the mid-season madness. The league is entering uncharted territory. For the first time in league history, Tier 2 teams will have a chance to leave their footprint on the league's history in meaningful regular season play. The league didn't do the best job of explaining this tournament beforehand, so if you're looking to understand how the knockouts work, and maybe learn a bit more about these contenders teams, you've come to the right place. Let's start off with the format for this tournament. So a total of 12 teams are competing in the East Knockouts, 6 Eastern Owl teams, and the top 6 qualifying contenders teams from the Spring Opens. These 12 teams will be split into 2 double elimination brackets. 3 Owl teams and 3 contenders teams will accompany each. The final team standing in both brackets will go on to represent the East in the mid-season madness. For those of you counting at home, that means 2 Eastern teams will be present for the mid-season madness only. Each series during this tournament play will be a best of 5, with 22 matches in total being played over the course of 3 weeks. That said, it's going to take quite some time to get through it all, which could make the dynamic of getting hot at the right time a bit less relevant. It's a good way to ensure that only the most consistent, most worthy teams end up moving on. The top 4 Eastern Owl teams record-wise so far get a first-round bye, that being the Spark, Charge, Fuel, and Infernal. The Dynasty and Dragons had the worst records from the qualifiers, so they will have to play a contenders roster in the first round. So that means right off the rip here in the first weekend, we're going to get some Overwatch League versus Overwatch Contenders gameplay, and it should be pretty hype. Aside from that, that's basically everything you need to know when it comes to rules, formatting, and the bracket. All that's left to say now is, let the best teams win. But before we get there, allow me to introduce you to the Tier 2 teams entering this tournament. The 6 teams joining the East are O2 Blast, Pokerface, Dreamers, Panthera, Sinpriza Gaming, and Rhodes. If you're unfamiliar with the Tier 2 scene, here's a quick summary of the teams and their rosters. Of the 6 qualifying rosters, it's worth noting that 5 are from Korean contenders and 1 China. Of those teams, I'd say that O2 Blast are easily the most popular and recognizable, so let's start with them. Even if you don't actively watch contenders, you've probably heard of them by now. It's where Proper and Pelican came from. It's what the entire Shock core is made of today. O2 Blast have been the most dominant Tier 2 team for a very long time, and they're still arguably the best to this day. O2 possesses multiple Overwatch League veterans, plus a few upcoming talents. Longtime tank player Marvel has come over to play main tank for this group, and honestly, he still looks as good as ever, and the fact that he gets to focus more so on his comfort picks, with attack being there to play off tanks, only benefits him more. Also on the team is Opener and Irony, 2 disappointing support players from last year looking to right their wrongs, and so far, they've found great success in O2's system and look much improved. But honestly, the place to really look out for is their other guys at DPS. Probe is a highly talented hitscan player that many people think is already OWL level, and similar words can be found on Top Dragon, who plays in a rotation alongside Knife. The general community was pretty shocked when Top Dragon didn't make OWL this year, so it'll be fun to see how he does. O2 has a really good rotation at DPS, with a nice veteran foundation to support them. They may not seem all that scary on the surface, but this team has been coaching up OWL level talent for years, and they're just a great overall team system where so many different names have found ways to thrive throughout the years, and it helps that a lot of their players have a chip on their shoulders for that extra motivation. Do not put it past these guys to make an upset or 2 happen in this bracket. If any team in the contender scene could possibly make a surprise mid-season madness appearance, it's definitely O2 Blast. Also cruising their way through qualifiers as the other top seed is Pokerface. Remember Muse, Finale, and Valentine? Yeah, they're plotting their revenge arc. They are determined to get back on the right track, and this tournament just might make it happen. They've all been playing as well as you could ask for guys who are looking at least somewhat washed based off of what we saw from them in the league, so a change of scenery just might be the thing they needed to realize their true potential. On the other hand, there's a few contenders players to maybe keep your eye on. For me, I'm looking at Arrow and Aiden. Arrow's a pretty talented hitscan player. He's a good rotation guy on this team who mostly plays on the sniper maps, but his mechanics are nothing to scoff at. He's a good spark plug off the bench for sure. And Aiden was once upon a time a main support on O2 Blast, so needless to say, he's got massive potential, and this is a good way to see if he still has something left in the tank. This team of rejects feels anything but spectacular on the surface, but they still did put in the work as one of the top seeds from the Opens, and they are determined to prove themselves. But don't be sleeping on some of the other guys just because they're not the 1 seeds from their respective brackets. A lot of people like to turn over to Dreamers as a major point of interest in this tournament. EasyHan already showed that he's not afraid of anybody thanks to his 2022 Valiant days. That is a guy who is underrated and can seriously make a difference. A good Sombra and a good Sojourn player for sure. If this guy applies his growth from the Valiant to this tournament, he could really surprise you. And his partner in crime, Spectra, is another player from Contenders that fans have vouched for over the years. Some people were pretty surprised that he didn't make OWL this year, and you should expect him and EasyHan to be one of the better damage duos of the Contenders rosters. Also not to be underestimated, and my personal favorite player on the team is Dreamer. He was a solid, flexible option for the LA Valiant and Houston Outlaws back in the day, and in my opinion, he's definitely still got something. However, his role on this team is, well, unique. He kind of fills in multiple roles. He's usually the starting tank player, he's a reliable Winston, Rhine, and ball player, but sometimes on this team he'll randomly sub in at support. It's a weird strategy that probably doesn't make much sense from anyone's point of view out there, but it's a thing that you should know about in advance just so you're not losing your mind when this guy randomly gets subbed out potentially. Just imagine how cursed it would be if Dreamer diffed an OWL player on Brig or Ana. That sounds absolutely hilarious, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of hoping it happens. It'd be pretty funny. You get the point though, Dreamers are exciting and they're pretty darn good. You know who else is pretty good though? The Group B runner-up, Panthera. They are also a pretty big fan of Valiant rejects as they're rocking with Fate and Becky on their roster. Come on now, did you really think we were going to go a year without Fate in the Overwatch League? This guy is inevitable. He refuses to go away. This former champion is trying to show the world that he's not washed just yet. And here in 2023, he is finally fulfilling that role as a solo tank, slowly but surely making improvements to catch up. Fate has shown a lot of different looks on tank since joining this team, with a wide range of results. As a veteran of the game who wants to show he still has something, he'll surely be a focal point of Panthera and a leader they depend on. Fate has a chance to not only go off and make Panthera look like one of the better Contenders teams, but a chance to maybe save his career if he plays well enough, so I'd watch the Panthera games very carefully. As for Becky, a lot of people argue he was the best player on the 2022 Valiant. The man showed that he can play. He is a baller. He's flexible. He's talented. He can keep up with premier talent. He has shown that, and he is part of a pretty respectable damage line. Former Toronto Defiant DPS player Neist has been putting in the work since his OWL departure, taking part in many important tournaments and finding success on his current team as well as T1 in the past. He's been the hard flex of this Panthera team, often filling in multiple roles. He's done double duty as a dedicated Sombra and Tracer player, and his Hanzo is pretty nasty too. He's a proven, solid, primary playmaker that this team can rely on, and I think the combined might of this DPS line alongside Fate makes for a solid underdog that have slowly but surely gotten better over time. With a few weeks to prepare for this thing, they just might even take that level higher. Speaking of finding a higher level, Sin Priza Gaming are out to try and accomplish the same exact thing. Sin Priza established themselves as a top roster in Korean Contenders in 2022. They're relatively new to the scene, but have managed to stay relevant for just about every major event in recent memory. And for me, it all starts with their hitscan prodigy, Aid. Even against the likes of O2 Blast, you can feel his presence. His deadly accuracy on the Sojourn and the Ashe are not to be trifled with. He is a danger to just about any opponent out there, and he's got some great help with OWL veterans to you and although backing him up. Sin Priza are pretty likable overall. But the thing is, they're not as strong as they used to be. With Lee Soo-min, Top Dragon, and Sanguinar all gone, there's a lot more to prove out there. So many of their new guys have to step up to the plate if they want to do well, and that kind of pressure could very easily eat them alive with little experience. They nearly did beat Dreamers in a seeding matchup, which is definitely a good sign, but they've got a long way to go if they intend to make a deep run in the knockouts this week. Luckily for them though, they may not be the biggest underdog in this entire tournament. That pleasure probably belongs to Rhodes. Rhodes feels like the wild card of this tournament. They happen to boast a roster with a lot of notable talent that you've probably heard of before. The DPS line has former Spark DPS player Pineapple, and then former Guangzhou and Chengdu DPS player Aprita. You know, that guy that was supposed to be the next big thing, just to be screwed over by Chengdu in their budget situation, then proceed to ride the bench for Guangzhou Charge for a year? Yeah, that guy. If you've been waiting to see what all the hype is about with this guy, here's your chance. Aprita's a mechanically sound hitscan, tracer, and Sombra player, and it's very cool to finally see him play in the league after getting denied so many times before. Now looking at support, Rhodes have former Valiant and Spark player Coldest, and he's actually going to be the main support of this team. Playing flex support over him is former Chengdu Hunters DPS Kaneki. Kaneki decided to make the switch to support and has shown mixed results so far. His mechanics have certainly shined through when given the opportunity, but it's the consistency that we're still waiting on. This support combination is interesting. It's very weird just knowing what these two used to be, and I'm not exactly sure if it inspires confidence. Coldest was not the best at the Overwatch League level, and Kaneki still feels very new to the support role. Thankfully though, Tank is also in a pretty decent spot to partially help make up for it. They're rocking with just a small 5-man roster, and they feel like heavy underdogs. They're not the greatest, but honestly, the names and the roster they're going with is nothing in comparison to their playstyle. That is where this team truly grabs your attention. They play a lot of the standard that you'd expect in the current meta, but also like to throw in some curveballs to keep their opponents on their toes. They like Reaper. They like Wrecking Ball. They like Pharah. Rhodes is most certainly not afraid to get a little freaky on you, and they might actually get really creative in some of these matches to attempt to gain an edge over unsuspecting victims. Whether or not it actually works is heavily up for debate, but at least there's a possibility that Rhodes make things a bit more interesting. The entertainment value could certainly make them one of the most fun contenders teams in the knockouts to watch, and I look forward to watching them and the 5 other contestants get their shot at glory in the Overwatch League starting this Saturday. The question remains though, do any of them have a realistic chance of making it through these knockouts and participating in the mid-season madness? Well, if I'm being honest with you, the chances for everybody feels relatively low, with only 2 spots available. Charge, Infernal, and Spark should be all over it. I don't think any of these teams have the necessary roster strength to compete. Maybe there's a world where O2 Blast could make it out or something, since Inferno are like the only team in their way truly, but that's mostly just wishful thinking. Some upsets are definitely possible, especially in the early stages of the bracket, but outside of that, I'm not expecting much. It's just those few Eastern teams that are actually vulnerable. I mean, even Shanghai can probably stand up to most, if not all of these teams. I'm really not that worried about the Overwatch League teams. This should mostly serve as a way for these contenders rosters to gain some exposure. If it's anything more than that, it's just a bonus. Regardless, it's really cool to witness a brand new chapter unfold like this. It is history in the making. It opens up a new world of possibilities that could set the precedent in this league for years to come. And if you're looking forward to the East Knockouts and you found this video helpful, hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel would be greatly appreciated. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.